What is up, my YouTube friends? My name is KotyTang. Ghost of Tsushima. Probably one of the most aesthetically pleasing games I've ever played. It's not without its problems, however. I hear plenty of people calling it Game of the Year. But for me, I think that confusion all boils down to its ability to be stylistically expressive and its engaging combat system, rather than its actual ability to be a game worthy of the Game of the Year title. From the very start, the game was thrilling, and I was already hooked after I gained control of Jin for the first time. The combat system is where the game thrives the most, with its 4 different combat styles. Something I find unique about this game is their approach to exploration. It's not because of the collectibles you find laying around, but more so about what everything looks like when you get there. The game has a vastly different approach to what exploration means for a video game. While I was playing, I started going to areas not because I thought I would find some special item, but actually because I wanted to see what the place would even look like. There are so many environments in this game where the reward was literally just walking through them. Of course, many of these did actually lead to finding something, but just walking through them for the first time was amazing. Exploration for games has taught us that the reward is always the item, and while that's an absolute truth for 99% of games out there, Ghost of Tsushima is the first game I've ever played that has taken me to areas that made me happy just to see it. The world design for this game is some of the best, if not the best, I've ever experienced in an open world game, and every single location of this world feels entirely different from the last. The way this game approaches exploration is something that many games should be taking notes on. Not to copy it, but to understand what they're trying to do here. The lack of a minimap and having the wind guide you allows you to view the world as you travel it, rather than constantly watching a waypoint get closer on your HUD. By doing this, you won't ever miss out on seeing the environments as you travel throughout the world, since your guide requires you to always be looking around the area. The progression of your character also inspires you to explore, since it's the only way to raise your health bar and resolve level. It also has plenty of collectibles to discover hidden throughout the world, through different swords to find to unique accessories that you can't buy or craft at the stores. Ghost of Tsushima's approach to exploration completely trumps most games on the market, and more games should follow in their footsteps. The story is nothing special, but it's still quite enjoyable to see how Jin starts from a samurai completely entwined in his family's code of honor, to a ninja who ignores that code of honor and will use any tactic and tool at his disposal to defeat the Mongols. Now, with all that praise, you think, how is this game not that good? This game appears to have everything going for it on the surface. However, the game is not nearly as creative as many people would have you believe. There are 4 different fighting styles to choose from. At first, each fighting style is just a fun new way to fight people, but as you progress in the game, they actually become less of fighting styles and more like the solution to each enemy you encounter. Until you beat the game, it will also constantly remind you, literally pausing your game mid-fight, whether you're in a boss or just fighting some random enemies, and hammer it into your system that you should be using the correct style. If you want to use stone style against a spearman, you'll be hacking at them for a while as they constantly block and dodge you. If you want to use wind style against a guy with a shield, same result. You see, fighting styles of the game are actually designed so that you are required to use them against your opponent in the correct order. It's like rock, paper, scissors, but the only difference is somebody will always have rock and the other will always have scissors. There is no paper, so there is no in between. Another thing is Jin can only use his katana and his bow throughout the entire game. He can't use a spear, a shield, or even a naginata. Samurai are actually pretty well versed in more than just the bow and the katana, so it's a shame to not be able to choose your own fighting style. Like I said, as you progress after the first act of the game, you'll be limited to using the sword styles in a semi-required way against enemies. It's one thing for a style to be more preferred than the other, but no one fighting style trumps the entirety of another. It's all about how you approach. The game's primary focus when it comes to combat is the stagger system. If you want to stagger an enemy so you can mercilessly stab them and kill them in mere seconds, then you gotta use the right fighting style. Otherwise, you'll just slowly whip away at the stagger gauge. You don't necessarily have to use the correct fighting style, but considering the stagger system is the most abusable thing in the game, you'll want to use it to speed up every fight. As for the difficulty of the combat, you'll die in roughly 3 to 5 hits depending on how much life you have, but after a few hours in combat, you'll rarely get hit anyway. And the developers definitely know this, since the one-hit kill ghost mode requires you to not ever get hit while killing enemies. It's not a bad thing, but I think it is something to improve on. Every enemy seems to only have 3 or 4 moves that they'll constantly repeat while attacking you, and they're all easy to block and dodge. I can see how people would still find a challenge failing to parry or dodge certain moves, but after attaining all 4 fighting styles, I just flew through combat like it was nothing. I think that's kind of a neutral point. It could be harder, but it is still satisfying to just slaughter enemies like they're nothing. And this holds true even for hard mode. In the beginning, maybe you'll find a little bit of a challenge, but again, once you have all 4 fighting styles, you trump whoever you're fighting. There's essentially nothing they can do because once you're using the correct fighting style, that stagger gauge skyrockets and it takes 2 or 3 hits, and then they're completely open to just be attacked. The duels are probably the only place that you'll really fail in. You can only use your sword and whatever fighting style works best. There are actually quite a lot of these bosses, and they tend to all fight exactly the same, making them pretty repetitive after the first few fights. The game has one of the worst stealth systems I have ever seen in a video game. Not because it's too hard, more like because it's way too easy. As long as you're just walking, enemies are completely deaf to you. Most of them don't go on patrols and will just stand around in 2 spots with their backs turned away from you. They will also only search for you for a couple seconds before returning to their original locations. Granted, that is what happens in most stealth games, but you would assume that once you're caught and sneak away, the base won't stop being on alert for at least an entire day. Or at least have the guards all change their schedules to be more aggressive rather than passive. I mean, someone just broke into their base and got caught. The crafting system is oversimplified. 1 to 3 item types for every upgrade, and it's the same no matter the item. Materials are only used to upgrade very specific things. Nothing ever mingles. You'll never use iron to upgrade your armor. Metals are always used for swords. And by that, trees are always for bows, and flowers are for different colors or crafting headgear, and hides are always for upgrading your tools' capacities. You can't craft your tools. You can only buy them or find them laying around. Simple quality of life designs like that are completely missing in this game. This is also just a personal gripe. Some of these outfits make Jin look like he just found the lost and found bin of Japan and threw on every plus size item he could find. Jin needs to find some more fitting clothes because some of these things look like they added an extra 40 pounds onto him. I do like how upgrading your armor changes the appearance of your clothing, but I would prefer to be able to change specific pieces myself since some of the upgraded looks have things I just don't like. Also, this final armor that you obtain is really ugly and you can't even upgrade it, so it's one of the worst rewards in the game with one of the longest sequences to get it. The side quests are the only thing left that gives the game life after the ending. Each one has you doing relatively interesting things. Of course, some of them are very short, but what you do in them makes them all worthwhile. And that brings us to the problem with most open world games, and this one is sadly no exception. How come every town you can liberate or complete is the same as the other? The game feels so dead after you have no quest left to complete. Give every area its own liberation quest. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. Because of how fluid the combat is, liberating places is still fun by itself, and it fills Tushima with beauty since it's no longer a decrepit, ransacked place. Basically what I'm saying is, the Liberation Act alone isn't enough. Make every Mongol territory unique with its own special mini-quests going on. I know they give you special objectives to complete, but that's not enough. Why don't they have their own stories? While doing quests, you have to actually stake out a place and see what you can do with it. However, when you actually play the game, you don't stake it out at all. You don't review your options, you just run in and kill everybody and then leave. There's no difference between each territory aside from the layout. And while it's cool to have different environments to kill everybody, there's no actual incentive to liberate these areas aside from the beauty boost it gives to that area of Tsushima. And that's what makes this a generic open world game. Go to area, liberate, go to next area, liberate. After completing the game just feels so devoid of purpose and life because you're just doing busy work at that point. We've come to a point where an open world game can't be filled with busy work. We have to put more into games like this, so every stronghold and town conquered by the Mongols should absolutely feel unique and fresh upon walking near it. And not just a new layout, but also give it its own mini quest to follow in order to liberate that place. And take it even further. By liberating a place, it should also open up even more side quests in that area. Give every town its own story to follow. Like I said, after you beat the game, it feels so hollow and dead. There's no more progression or reason behind what you're doing. When playing the story, you have the game guiding you and making sure everywhere and everything feels important. After beating it, it just feels like there's no point to what I'm doing. I'm just beautifying the landscape at that point. I won't open up a new quest line, I'm not going to meet any new characters. After I beat the game, whether or not I keep playing just doesn't matter. The endgame content is just so barren. I shouldn't feel like I have no purpose. It's an open world game. Until I've done everything, I shouldn't feel like I'm done. Save for the collectibles, obviously. Those are always a choice. The main quest, mythic tales, and character quests are all really well designed though, and I didn't dislike any of them. Though I will say that Act 3 wraps up way too quickly and the ending of that is very rushed. Where in the other acts you directly helped out in the characters getting prepared for the next battle, in the third act everybody else sets up while you wait on them. And then the final mission just begins because everybody else already prepared without you. The Act 3 doesn't really feel like an act, but the last mission also isn't bad at all. I had a lot of fun during it. It just happened almost immediately after you see that you're on Act 3. The epilogue was great though. I'm not going to spoil it here. I just really liked the actual ending of the game. Honestly, Ghost of Tsushima is a great game and a great send-off to the PS4's lifespan. But it also shows the monotony that we've allowed for open world games. They could be so much more, but I feel like too many developers add things to do without considering how to even give them purpose. PS5 developers need to really take a step back and think about how they could add meaning into their open world games, because so many of them forget to ask how should we, and instead just ask how can we. The philosophy shouldn't be the more blips on the map the better the game is. Access of content does not equal quality. Quality of the content equals quality. Ghost of Tsushima is good, but it isn't that good, and it doesn't even come close to being in the same category of games that deserve Game of the Year. It follows the design of a generic open world game, but its combat and beauty is blinding many people into thinking it's a masterpiece, when it's far from that.